Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to the Sunday live stream where we talk about photography and catch up with the community, see how everybody's doing. I'll get the chat section over here up in a second, but thanks for being here with me this morning and a lot to talk about actually, because I've been out shooting and doing photo jobs and other stuff. So let me get the chat over here working, and then we'll get started. And leave in the comments if you can see and hear me okay as well before I get too far into the stream with no audio or video. 1 second and we'll get the, sorry I didn't have this ready. It's always something in these streams that I forget to do. And I'll just explain again for those of you that might be new to the stream. I always put them up here on the side so that people that watch right after the stream's over, they will have the chat up right away. And this also allows me to watch the stream right after as well. I like to watch my own streams. I don't know if that's narcissistic or, but just to see if I missed anyone's questions or if there's something I can do to improve the live streaming experience. You'd think after 5 or 6 years I'd have this down, but it's always something. My voice is a little bit hoarse this morning again, but let me check in. Let me pull up the chat window and see who's in. It's Darko, Roger, good to see you. And I'm going to answer a few questions today as well that I got before the stream. I think I can identify at least one person. When people email me questions, rather than putting them in the chat or in a comment section, I don't like to reveal who they are because, just for privacy's sake, maybe they don't want people to know that they're the one asking the question. But if you email me a question before the stream, let me know in the email if I can let the audience know who asked the question, if that's okay. Or not. It doesn't matter to me either way. And I don't think the audience really cares, but maybe you do, right? Robert, good to see you. And I see Sister Matura, Marcia. I heard you're going up to Maine, Marcia. David was telling me that's going to be awesome with some of the OM system ambassadors. I think Emily might be one. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a workshop, I guess. I didn't see that stream with Lisa and Tom that she did, but I'll watch that later, probably this week. And Seraphin is here. Good morning. And that's me checking in. And Bob O'Neill, Jeff Painter, thank you for the link to that video about the Ripley. I did watch that. It's always fascinating to see how movie scenes are lit. Because sometimes they look very natural, and in that video that you sent me, they were talking about how the lighting looked a little bit unnatural, and they would normally correct that in post, but they liked the look of that because there's a little bit more of a vintage look to it, because that's how they used to light movies in the past without doing digital correction later. And even though and another thing, Ripley is, let me just go on. Ripley is a series on Amazon, I think, that is all black and white, and the cinematography is really amazing. What I said in the last stream was that it was like watching a slideshow of amazing black and white images, but it's not. It's a movie, and but the lighting, the compositions were really something. So I highly recommend as a photographer, particularly if you're interested in black and white photography, to watch that series, at least the first 2 episodes, to get a feel for the kind of cinematography that's in that, and get some amazing. I don't know. I think anyone that watches that would be impressed. And then, of course, if you watch the entire, I don't know, I think it's two seasons, 16 or 20 episodes. The storyline is quite interesting as well. It's not to everyone's taste, I know. Um, it's sort of a mystery, um, I guess, procedural type show. It's hard to categorize. I'm not that good at categorizing. And I see Roberto's here. Marco, good to see you. And Mark Rapa, thank you from Italy. I appreciate that. And let's see. Marcia says, question though, I now had the Home One Mark II. Congratulations. Starry Sky's great album, the Super Control panel. I don't know what I did that it does not show up. It's a good question. I don't use it that often, obviously, but I can't think of anything right now. It might come to me later because there is a setting. It might come to me later. I'll let you know. If anyone has an answer though right away, just go ahead. My brain just isn't what it used to be. Maybe early stages of dementia. I don't know. I hope not. I don't have any history of that in my family. But as you get older, your brain slows down a little bit. I've noticed that I forget a lot of things. Long-term memory seems to be okay. I can remember things, selected things quite a ways back, but like what I had for breakfast yesterday, I'd have to really think. I know what I had this morning. Just some eggs and some not hash browns. I guess it's hash browns. I just diced up a potato and cooked it. Yeah, John Langston says he's 54 and noticing memory issues. I'm 58. So time is not on our sides, as they say, right? And Karen says, I'm new to the home system. Is there a way to move the AF target around without taking my eyes from the viewfinder? I believe so. You can use the touchscreen or if you don't have the joystick on your camera, you can use the touchscreen. You have to activate the touchpad in the menu system. So look in your user manual, depending which model you have. Look in the user manual and search for touchpad. And you'll find a way to use your thumb on the touchscreen to move the target around. You can also use the D-pad. That's my preferred way. The D-pad, I have a lot more precision, which is the D-pad here. I just use the D-pad. All the Olympus cameras have this. Most of the Olympus cameras have a touchpad where if you're holding it up to your eye, you can use the touchpad to move the point around. And that's not too bad. The precision is not quite what I would prefer. This is a lot more precise. And then of course if you have a joystick on your camera, like the OM1s and the EM1s, you can use that. Uh, and George says my memory brain is going. And 2 cups of espresso, break champion. Wow. I usually have 1 cup in the morning. I mean, I might drink another. By cup, I mean like 10 ounces, which is less than a liter, like 2/3 of a liter coffee, and or half, like less than half a liter. I'm sorry. I don't know what 10 ounces translates to. I'm trying to do it in my brain. Reason being is my doctor said I should drink 2 to 3 liters a day of water, preferably, but I mix it up with tea. And so if I have to take a break like an hour, it's not my fault. It's doctor's orders. uh, and the Ripley actor is Moriarty from Sherlock. Good actor. Oh, interesting. I haven't watched the Sherlock series. I did watch one. It was a little bit more modern version. I don't know. Anyway, it says I had to reduce my coffee due to ulcer. It works. I drink only a few ounces a day now. Ooh, yeah, and ulcer, that would suck. I hope I never get that. I got other issues, but not an ulcer. I thought I had an ulcer, but it was something else. You miss your Cuban coffee. I don't know. I would think that adding cream to your coffee would neutralize some of the acidity, right? I don't know. I haven't had an ulcer before, so I don't know what triggers it. Maybe it's the caffeine itself, right? Okay, so let me get into a few topics. I'm glad, so happy to see many of you here. And one of the questions I got was from the images on my Instagram page. Um, there was a couple of people asked the same question. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick without killing the stream here. And if I can pull up, oof, I got to figure out a way to do this next time. Yeah, it's close enough. Hmm. Do that. Uh, so it was, I think it was in here. It says, why haven't you got the lens wide open for the proverbial bokeh? Just wondering. And it was a similar question elsewhere, but I did this portrait session, just for practice with my friend. And, I'm testing out a new lens that I can't really disclose what it is at this point for the Sony camera, Sony E-mount. But it's a 35 millimeter, and I shot it at f11. And uh, so the question, because I put the specs up here. I try to put as many specs as I can that are relevant. So I shot this at f11 with the Godox 8200, behind a 30-inch umbrella outdoors. And the question was, why did I shoot this at f11? And I think there was another question similar right here. It says, I was thinking exactly the same thing. Others asked, what lens and camera? Sony, it almost looks like background. Great shot, lighting is perfect. This wasn't quite over the replies. Yes, I hope that when you do a video on it, you'll go over the reasoning for the ND filter. Okay. So I also mentioned that I used a 5-stop ND filter. Um, so the rationale is pretty straightforward. Let me see if I can pull up another screen. So, it doesn't matter any of these images. Here's some that I did. Okay, so why did I shoot at f11 on, where is it? Is it even in here anymore? No, it's not in here. But the question was, like this one's at f11, I believe, right? Because you can see the depth of field's not quite as shallow. And, so you get a sense of the much better sense of the environment. It's obvious we're at a park because you can see the benches and the trash can. And the reason being is I was using flash, but the ambient light was so bright that I had to stop down to f11 basically, because I was using flash. Let me put this in order. Because I was using flash, my sync speed was limited to 1/200th of a second in this case. And when I'm at 1/200th of a second, it's going to be overexposed if I shot at anything smaller than f11. So because I was using flash. And the reason I was using flash is because she was under a tree. And under that tree, there's a lot of dappled or spotty lighting, all over her from the sun peeking through the trees. So I have an example of that here. If you look on her blouse here, you can see all of this dappled lighting all over her face, on her hair. This is without flash, right? And this is at f2.8. So I added the ND filter so that I could stop the lens down to f2.8 or lower if I wanted to. But I stopped it down to f2.8 to crush the ambient light and get that shallow depth of field. And then when I crush the ambient light, sorry, I thought I heard somebody at the door. One second. One second. Sorry.
Please give the. Okay.
All right. Sorry. It was my neighbor's trash can. There's nobody here. So anyway, I was getting all this dappled light. So I wanted to reduce the ambient light to a point that um, I could overpower the shadows and everything and the ambient light falling on her and get rid of all that dappled light. I hope that makes sense. So the intent of the flash is to even out the lighting on her blouse and on her face. But I couldn't stop it down or knock the ambient light down so much that it crushes the ambient light to black, because I wanted to include the background, the trees and the greenery behind her, because that's a nice complementary color, right? This red and this green back here. So if I stop the lens down more, stopped it up to say f5.6 or f8, with the flash, this would this would no longer be exposed bright enough for me to use it. It would just go to black. Now, if I wanted a black background, I could do that. I'd probably have to get a 10-stop ND filter because it's like midday sun, right? But I could do that and stay within the 1/200th of a second shutter speed. So those are the reasons, or this is a strategy I use to get rid of this dappled lighting on her blouse and on her face, was to, because of my limitation of 1/200th of a second, and I was using flash, and I wanted to maintain enough ambient light in the background to keep the ambience of the environment and the green color, and also that shallower depth of field that I get at f2.8. Those are all the reasons I shot. Uh, that's the reason I used the ND filter. The reason I shot at f11 before is because of I didn't use the ND filter. So the ND filter allows me to stop the lens down. I did not use, Roberto's asking if I used any bounce reflectors. I did not. Uh, there was enough light bouncing off of the ground on the grass to kind of fill in the shadows just enough uh, that I didn't really need it. Because just right outside, I don't have a shot to show you, but right around her feet, like within less than a meter, right? The grass was very, very bright. Like where I was standing in the sun, and to her right, camera left, there was a lot of grass that was very brightly lit. So the reflection off the grass was providing kind of a bounce lighting. So I didn't really need to use a bounce reflector. Um, so let me go to, so here's the image with the flash and a little bit of editing, right? Softening the skin and a couple other things. But for the most part, you can still see a little bit of dappled lighting on her blouse, and there's dappled lighting on her hair that I actually, in post-processing, I accentuated just a little bit on purpose, So the dappled lighting from the trees actually created a sort of rim lighting or hair lighting that I really liked. And uh, but I eliminated that annoying dappled lighting that you get when you shoot in shade sometimes. And and then I set the flash power to like 1/32nd power. I was at 1/200th of a second, f2.8, ISO 100. So ISO 100. So I could have saved another stop and go to ISO 50. But anyway, uh, or went to ISO 200 and stopped the lens down to, a lower aperture like f2. Just do the math on stops and exposure. I had plenty of wiggle room. Is the point I'm trying to make. At 1/32nd power on the flash, 1/200th of a second, f2.8, ISO 100. So I had some wiggle room of at least one stop in any direction. And depending on which parameter, I had several stops of play, 3 or 4 stops to play around with to get the exposure that I wanted. Okay, so that's that. And then here's another example of the same shot, just different pose. But you can see some of the dappled lighting. And I like that some of the dappled lighting stayed in the shot because of the hair lighting, but also I think it adds a more natural ambiance to the overall scene. Uh, yep, there's another one. This one actually I shot at, I think this was at f8 or f11. I forget because the depth of field is not quite as shallow here. This was earlier on in the setting. There's the f11 shot, and then there's a couple others. That was in a studio. These came out pretty awful. Uh, I I have to explain this later. I'm gonna have to go back and shoot her again in the studio and get the lighting more accurate because the lighting was set up not to do this shot specifically. I set the lighting up for a different kind of shot, but then suddenly, I had another person I'm teaching with me, and she quickly changed what she wanted to do with the scene, and I was like, I don't think we were quite done with the other one, but okay, let me do this, that, and the other thing. All right, so uh, hopefully that answers the question about why I used f11. It's basically because I had no choice. The ambient light was too bright, and I was stuck at 1/200th of a second sync speed because I was using flash. And the reason I use an ND filter was for all the reasons I stated. All right, so that was that. Okay, I went out. David Crooks is here. How you doing, David? Uh, I went to this park not too far from me that had like hummingbirds all over this feeder. David Dave knows all the good places to go for wildlife shots. He's really hardcore. And that is the first time I ever shot hummingbirds. And I kind of went a little bit unprepared, other than bringing my 300 millimeter f4. This over here, uh, my 300 f4 with the 1.4x teleconverter, and my OM1, of course, right? And that's not stable there. Let me put that. That's better. If I really thought about it, I would have brought some lighting, and I would have gotten much better shots. But I was forced to shoot at like ISO, you know, 8,000, 12,000, 3,000, crazy high ISOs because it was morning light, it was in the shade, and I had to be at like 1/2000th to 1/4000th of a second. I adjusted up and down a little bit, around those numbers to try to keep the ISO low when the hummingbirds were kind of stationary. Because even though their wings flutter very fast, they're actually very stable. So you can get a good shot of the body with blurry wings at a relatively low ISO. Because you can use a much slower shutter speed, like 1/1000, 1/500. I don't know if I got any 1/500, but I certainly have some 1/1000, 1/1500 type shots. And so today, this morning, in fact, last night, I started last night, but I didn't get any of the settings right. But this morning, I practiced a little bit in morning light with this flash. That's why the flash is on here. So that when I go back next time, David, we need to go back. If you can get a day off during the week, that would be great. But David has a day job, so I don't know. Um, but tonight or tomorrow morning, I'm going to practice using LED lighting and see what distances I need for that. But I think I can get up to 5 or 10 frames per second with flash because I can set the power down to like 1/128th or 1/32nd power because we got pretty close to the hummingbirds, maybe 3 meters, right? 10 or 12 feet from the hummingbirds. And that's why the shots are relatively crisp and clear because I didn't have to crop a whole lot. So let me show you a couple of those shots. Let's see, where are those at? Probably in my Instagram folder. Yeah. So let me go back to this. And this is from this morning. So this is a shot with flash. And I was standing a good 10 meters away, pretty far away, and I was at about full power flash. But it did fill in the shadows very nicely. So I think when we're doing the hummingbirds, I can do this, more like whatchamacallit. I can probably be a 1/32nd or 1/164th. And that'll allow me to shoot at like 5 to 10 frames per second. I'm gonna have to practice a little bit. In which case I might get some more interesting shots. With hummingbirds, you don't have to be at a high frame rate all the time, but this is a shot from last night. It was JPEG. Pissed me off. Somehow I had my camera in JPEG only mode, so I didn't get very good details out of this shot. This one came out pretty good. All right, here's a hummingbird shot, and I'll zoom in there. But this is without flash, right? We're working with just ambient light and the shade. As you can see, even though I fixed the white balance, you can tell the lighting is very, very soft and even. And but I got good detail, and I think what are we at? We're at ISO 4000 here, 1/4000th of a second at 5.6, and I dialed in -2 EV on the camera because the background was very dark, as you can see here. So the camera tended to overexpose the shot. So -1 EV would have been probably perfect, but I dialed in -2 because I have some wiggle room with DxO Photo Lab because I can do the noise reduction. So I underexposed about a stop more than I really needed to, but that allowed me to use ISO 4000 instead of ISO 8000. So there's that, and a lot of shots I shot at 1/2000th of a second because I wanted to keep the ISO low. But anyway, this shot came out pretty terrific, I think. Really, really good detail. The wings are pretty much frozen, and it's an interesting action shot, two of them, of the hummingbird feeding in a natural setting. Now, the feeders were right around these same plants, right? So it's not an all natural shot. So let me see, what else do we have here? Yeah, this one was okay. Let me see what the settings here were. 1/2000th of a second. So you can see at 1/2000th of a second, the wings blur quite a bit. And I only dialed in -1 EV because my ISO was pretty decent at ISO 2500. I really have no problem shooting up to ISO 12,000 on the OM1 with the noise reduction that I get with DxO Photolab. As long as I can fill the frame or get a good portion of get enough pixels on the subject. If I can get enough pixels on the subject, 2 or 3 megapixels at least on the subject, then I'm good. Because this image here, let's see, this image here is 15 megapixels. So yeah, this image here is, you can see down here, it tells me this is a 7.5 megapixel image. So I'm getting plenty of pixels onto the subject. And this one was shot at 1/800th of a second. So this goes back to my other point about these hummingbirds, once they're kind of flying in the air, they don't move around a lot. They're very, very stable. It's almost like a bird on a stick shot. So I was perfectly fine shooting a 1/800th of a second. And that kept my ISO down to 1/1600th. And of course, I still dialed in some EV here. I think this was kind of accidental. Normally, I thought I was at -2 or -1 on all of them. But anyway, neither here nor there. I got plenty of wiggle room because I do use DxO noise reduction. And as you can see, and I'll punch in, ISO 1600 is so clean and all of the details really, really come out. When you shoot at higher ISOs, it looks sharp and clean, but you don't get quite the same fidelity or details as you would at shooting a lower ISO, even though the noise reduction is pretty awesome. And you'll see an example of that here. Someone else had asked me, how does Workspace AI noise reduction compare to DxO Photolab with D Prime? So I did my best in Workspace to edit the same image, and this is at ISO 12,800. And, Workspace does okay, right? But when you compare that to DxO, I mean, it's here. I over sharpened a bit, but you can see there's a big, big difference in the quality. And this image is on my Flickr page. If you want to kind of pixel peep, because I think I got a 1:1. Yeah, I pretty much at 1:1. This is overall an 8 megapixel image. But yeah, it's pretty huge difference. So here's Workspace all by itself. And you can see all of the details and the feathers are all smudged here. There's still plenty of noise around. And then we go to there's a couple iterations I was doing. We'll get to the DxO version. Here's another image I shot. This was at ISO 4000 again, 1/4000th of a second. Wings are very well frozen. Now this shot here, it doesn't even compare, right? But this I shot with the Olympus Stylus 1S that David Tellett let me borrow, long term apparently, as it turns out. But I'm at 300 millimeters on the Olympus, and this is like a 10-year-old camera or whatever, tiny sensor camera, and I'm at 1/1000th ISO 800, zoomed out to 300 millimeters, which is the maximum equivalent that this is capable of. And I use the same -1.7 EV exposure comp. I probably should have done -1. Anyway, this is one of those things where you get to know your camera and practice and know your subject. Then you can. I'll do better if I was using this camera exclusively. I would have gotten a much better shot. But this was kind of an on-the-fly thing. But I think this came out pretty good. And this is if you look down here, this is a 0.5 megapixel image. Here's another shot by the Olympus Stylus 1S, 1/1000th of a second, ISO 1250, same -1 EV. f2.8, which is the maximum aperture for this camera, because, with these older cameras, you really have to let as much light in as possible. But again, I think this came out amazing for a really old, compact, consumer grade type camera. This is really good, actually. Pretty impressive. At least I am. I'm impressed. I don't know if you guys are. Let me know what you think in the chat. This is another one with the Olympus Stylus 1S, I believe. Yeah. Olympus Stylus 1S, 1/2000th of a second. So this is the fastest shutter speed that this camera is capable of, 1/2000th of a second. ISO 1250. I believe I was on auto ISO shutter priority with a -2 EV, and then same idea, right? I'm underexposing the overall scene, but I'm saving the highlights of the bird, because the highlights would have been blown out if I shot at anything less than -2 EV boy. But I think this came out really good, and DxO, as you can see in the file name, I put DxO. This is the full resolution image. It's cropped in quite a bit, so 12 megapixel image. This is a 12 megapixel sensor, got cropped down to 0.67 megapixels, or 800 by 800. Okay, here's the ISO 12,800, 1/4000th of a second, ISO 12,800, -2 EV. And okay, this, I borrowed David. David has the Olympus or OM System 150 to 600 lens. So for this shot, I was using his lens. And I'm going to talk about this lens a little bit later, but I want you to see the results of this lens. Now, understand that, I have 20 megapixels I'm working with, and I knocked it down to 4.4 megapixels. So I have plenty of megapixels to work with and crop in. And again, when I punch in like this, you can see I over sharpened a bit. But generally speaking, at ISO 12,800, with DxO and this lens at the 600 millimeter focal length wide open, I believe, right? Yeah, I'm at f6.3. I still was able to pull out amazing detail. So that tells me two things, right? One is, DxO XD is awesome, right, with the D prime. Number two, this lens is awesome. If you feed it enough pixels, you're going to get amazing detail. Because imagine if I was able to get this shot at, say, ISO 1600 instead of ISO 12,800. I probably could have shot this at 1/4000th of a second and let the wings go a little blurrier so I could save another stop on the ISO. But this is what I got. And I think it's pretty amazing. I have another lens. Let's see, this camera. Can anybody guess what I shot this with? I'm going to say this was also this 150 to 600 that I borrowed from David. And this was probably a much lower ISO. Let's take a look. But I got about the same size, almost 5 megapixels here of pixels to work with. Oh, this is my 300 f4 with the teleconverter. I was wrong. 1/2000th of a second, lower ISO 2500. So I think 1/2000th of a second, if you don't mind the wings being a little bit blurry, this is a good compromise between getting a lower ISO and getting plenty of detail for hummingbirds. Because again, hummingbirds don't move that fast when they're getting ready to feed. They kind of stay in that area and hover around the feeder or the flower. And you don't really need super fast shutter speeds to capture that. Unless, of course, you want the wings to be tack sharp. In which case, 1/2000th of a second is not going to cut it, right? But yeah, you can tell, like if I go back to the previous image, you can see some of the details here. It's sharp, but some of the details are a little bit smudged at 12,800. But here at ISO 2500, The details aren't quite as smudged. It's very sharp, and I'm getting more and more feather detail all the way around on this bird. Okay, so let's go to the next one. This I'm pretty sure was the 150 to 600 because look at the megapixels here. I got 7.36 megapixels to work with. And the ISO is probably pretty low too. Let's take a look. Yeah, 1/2000th of a second, ISO 5000, -2 EV. Oh my God, this is my 300. I love my 300. I thought I had some more shots with the 150 to 600. Let me see. These are all on my Flickr page if you guys want to look at these a little closer. Okay, here's the 150 to 600 at ISO 8000. 1/2500th of a second. So, yeah, we got really, really, I mean, if I shot this at a lower ISO, we would have gotten tremendous detail in the feathers and things, but still not bad, right? I think this is really amazing. So this lens, if you can feed it enough pixels, let me see, this is the 150 to 600 also. ISO 6400. So I lowered the shutter speed down to 1/1000th of a second because the image stabilization in this lens is amazing. I was able to hand hold, no problem, 1/1000th of a second, zoomed all the way to 600 millimeters, which is, a 1200 millimeter equivalent, right? And in this case, I dialed in only -1 EV because the bird and the background had very even lighting. So I didn't want to underexpose the bird and bring up all the noise and shadows, right? So this is one of the other things you have to get good at when you're doing bird photography is knowing what exposure compensation to dial in, because the scene changes quite quickly. And if I use my regular -2 EV on this shot, it would have been too underexposed. And if I tried to bring up the details under his beak and all the way around here, all these dark areas, I would have gotten a lot more noise. Even though I'm at a lower ISO, I would have gotten a lot more noise and lost fine feather details. But look how good this lens is, right? Zoomed all the way at its maximum aperture. And again, TXO played a role in this, right? It's not just the lens, it's also the processing. Let's see, this one here, this is my, am I going the wrong direction? No. Oh, these are compressed. Okay, so these were what I posted on Instagram. I compressed these down quite a bit. Because if we look at this image, well, let me not get into this too much. But this gives you an idea. But you'll notice a lot of these shots, even something like this, and this, and this, if I had flash, maybe not this shot, but a lot of these shots, I could have used a flash. I'd be down to 1/500th of a second. That's about the fastest. And I'll talk about that more. Let me go back to, if you have any questions about these shots or anything else I talked about with the portrait, go ahead and start putting them in the chat section now, and I'll try and answer them for you. But let me come back live. So leave any questions you have about shooting hummingbirds, or remember, this is my first time shooting hummingbirds, so this was really on the fly training or practice. But I think I did okay. I'm gonna definitely do better next time, though. Right? Next time I'm gonna do better. I shoot birds a lot and birds in flight a lot, but hummingbirds are kind of a different animal because they're so tiny. And I was lucky that I could get within like 3 or 4 meters of the hummingbirds. So I was able to fill the frame or get a lot of megapixels or pixels to work with in the post processing. So even though they were high ISO, when you feed DxO enough pixels, it'll clean it up very nicely. So leave any questions, and I want to add some things about my experience with the 150 to 600 because this is the first time I've had any extended use of it. Meaning I used it for about 30 minutes straight, almost constantly for 30 minutes. And these are my observations, right? Is that give it enough pixels, it's tack sharp, right? And that's true for any lens, really. But this lens is very, very sharp. I think my 300 is a little sharper, just a little. But you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference unless you're pixel peeping. The other thing the 300 gives me is another full stop or third of a stop with the teleconverter. So I get a third of a stop more light with the teleconverter or a full stop more light, like a stop and a third more light without the teleconverter. So I'm going to get more light, use faster shutter speeds, lower ISOs with the 300, but I won't have the same reach. I'm going to have to reach. But if you can give it enough pixels to work with, that's the ideal situation, right? But for the most part, I would not hesitate to buy this lens with respect to the overall Sharpies at the long end, 600 millimeters, wide open. I feel like it performed exceptionally well. I was very happy. The stabilization in the 150 to 600, exceptional. I'd say just as good as my 300 f4. Especially considering at 600 millimeters, I was able to handhold that thing, get very, very steady shots, use slower, as you saw, I think I used, well, I'm not sure, but I did use very slow shutter speeds, like 1/1000th of a second at 600 millimeters. No problem at all for bird on a stick type shots. The range limiter is perfect. It has a range limiter switch. It was perfect for this scenario. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I was able to set the range up to be perfect for this kind of shooting. And honestly, that it's one of the switches in the middle. I think it's 2 meters to 10 meters, whatever that switch is in the middle. That is the perfect range between like 2 meters and 10 meters to shoot birds in general, not just hummingbirds, but birds in general. Bird on a stick type shots or hummingbirds. 2 to 10 meters. Anything more than that, if you're shooting at 20, 30, 40, 100 meters away, a lot of times the bird's going to be too small in the frame. You're not getting enough pixels to work with, and the image is going to be soft. I don't care if you have the 150 to 400 big white or you have this lens. If you don't have enough pixels to work with, and you're going to be at a high ISO because you're not going to be able to use flash at those distances either. You're not going to get a good image. So try to be within 2 to 10 meters. And as a rule of thumb, with a lot of exceptions, but generally speaking, if I'm doing a bird on a stick shot, I want to be within 2 to 10 meters. Anything more than that, it's not going to be a good shot. Don't waste your time. I see a lot of photographers. It's fine if you want to practice and you want to just capture the shot, but don't expect good results if you're more than 10 meters away for bird on a stick type shots. Like you see the birds in a nest feeding their babies, or you see whatever. If you're more than 10 meters out, it's not going to be a good shot. It'll be a fun and interesting shot, maybe, but it's not going to be sharp. And this lens has that perfect range, 2 to 10 meters. I don't think my 300 f4, it has a middle range here. 4 meters to infinity. 1.4 to, this has 1.4 to 4 meters. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it for bird on a stick. Then it has 1.4 meters to infinity, and then it has 4 meters to infinity. So 4 meters to infinity, I use that a lot, mostly for my bird in flight stuff. But the 150 to 600, I really like that 2 meter to 10 meter. I don't know, David, if someone could put in the chat section exactly what that range is, but it was something like that. That is perfect range for bird on a stick shots. And you got 600 millimeters to work with and a 20 megapixel sensor. My God, you're going to get terrific shots with that lens and you can shoot at 1/1000th of a second because the image stabilization is amazing. I wouldn't go lower than that, honestly, unless you're desperate on ISO. But yeah, I would stay at 1/1000th of a second if you're at 600 millimeters, generally speaking, with the image stabilization on. Oh, okay, thank you, David. David says it's that middle range is 2.8 meters to 10 meters. That is the perfect range for bird on a stick. And this lens has that setting. It's perfect. So they put a lot of thought into that particular setting. You can, I believe, in the OM1 and the EM1s, set the range in the menu system. I might have to do that next time. Then I don't have to worry about the switch. But a switch is so much more convenient, right? You just switch, right? And switch it back versus diving into a menu or setting up custom modes. I mean, there's ways around it in the OM1, EM1. You can assign a button to it, that kind of stuff. But uh, having a switch is so nice. So those are all of the pros of this lens, okay? Let me talk about a couple of the cons. Or they're not really cons. That's too strong of a word. I would say there's a couple of caveats. Okay, and I use this term a lot because really there's no cons. Like David says all the time, you get what you pay for. Um, so when you consider the price, uh, how can you call something a con when you didn't pay for it? It's like, oh, I bought a new car, but it's not, a Lamborghini or Ferrari. I just got a Mazda. So that's a con? That's not a con. Because my Mazda's not a Ferrari. It's because I didn't pay for a Ferrari. I paid for a Mazda. So, just to give you a car analogy. Um, so autofocus. Autofocus is spectacular. Okay. I had no problems locking on the subjects, but it's slower than my 300 f4. I'd say twice as slow, if not more. Going from point A to point B, it takes a while to jump over. And during that time, if I'm going from 2 meters to 10 meters, the 300 f4 is like it's like that. I mean, it's like a fraction of a second. You go from 2 meters to 10 meters. I don't know about 2 meters to infinity, but I'm doing this from memory from that day, right? Because I was shooting in that range. 2 meters to 10 meters, a 300 f4, even with the teleconverter, it's like it's like no problem. So if it misses focus, you can move your camera a tiny bit, and it'll pick up like this, right? Because sometimes it just goes all the way to the background and doesn't get, it misses focus sometimes, like any camera. But you recover very, very quickly. And if a bird is flying towards you or away from you, um, you're going to get more shots in focus with a pro lens like the 300 f4 because it's going to be able to keep up with birds moving very quickly towards you, particularly if you're within that 2 to 10 meter range, right? Because distances change extremely fast in that short of range. If we're talking about, and because of the depth of field, right, it's much shallower. So because you have a shallower depth of field and a fast moving subject, you need a fast autofocus system. So that's where this lens is a little bit weak. All right. If you're shooting birds at, say, further than 10 meters, 30 to 50 feet away, maybe 100 feet away, 100 yards, whatever. If you're shooting more than 30 or 50 feet away, the depth of field kind of offsets the speed of the autofocus, right? You don't need quite the same depth of field further away. So I think if you're shooting further distances, the autofocus speed is not going to be a big hindrance to your photography for birds in flight. Just my opinion. I haven't actually shot with it for birds in flight far away. I might do that next time David and I go out. If an opportunity comes up, I'm going to try it. Uh, but I don't think it would be a problem. From the shots I've seen David take with the lens, I don't think he's having any problem with birds that are further away because of those two factors, right? Being further away, the depth of field uh, kind of offsets any speed in the lens, autofocus. So it's kind of a con or a weakness in the lens when is the autofocus speed in that short range. And that's it. Oh, and the weight, the size and weight. I think I would get used to it. I mean, 30 minutes with that lens, I was feeling it. I was like, wow. And that's partially because, I, I haven't been working out in a long time, but ultimately it is a full size lens, full frame lens, full size. I don't think they could have made it smaller, even if they designed it for micro four thirds. And I've talked about that in other streams. I won't get into it here, but that's probably as small as they can make a 150 to 600 lens anyway. But it's a full size lens at f6.3, 600 millimeters. And you're getting a 1200 millimeter reach with the full 20 megapixel resolution. It's pretty amazing. And it also takes teleconverters. I don't recommend it personally. Seriously, if something is that far away that you need a teleconverter on top of that, I wouldn't bother shooting something like that far away. There'd be too much atmospheric distortion. Of course, there's exceptions, but I would not bother buying a teleconverter for that lens unless you had a very specific purpose for the teleconverter. The 300 millimeter f4 is a no-brainer to buy the 1.4 teleconverter, in my opinion. The reduction in resolution is nominal, especially if you give it enough pixels to work with, meaning filling the frame as much as you can with the subject. It's almost a must-have with the 300 millimeter f4. The 150 to 600, getting a teleconverter for that lens, I think would be a waste of money. Unless you had a very specific reason you needed to use the teleconverter, but it's not going to help you at all. Okay, so ultimately, if you understand the weaknesses of that lens, shoot it fast as shutter speed as you can. Really, at 1/4000th of a second is ideal. But I think at this point I can highly recommend that lens if you can deal with the size and weight and the slower autofocus at short distances. For my money, I would get the 300 f4 with the teleconverter. It's probably 500 or 600 more overall to do it that way. But I think you're getting much better lens. It's going to be smaller, lighter, faster in terms of aperture, and a little bit sharper. Seriously, a little bit sharper. Uh, yeah, what lens would I buy? That would be the direction I go, but you lose the functionality of the zoom. A lot of people like to be able to zoom out when they're tracking birds in flight and then zoom into that bird. It's a lot easier. For me, with a little practice, I'm pretty good at if I see a bird in the sky, I can just pull my camera up and within a fraction of a second, I have it in the frame. Not to say I don't miss a lot of shots. I do miss a lot of shots, but for the most part, I'm pretty content with my skill set to work with a prime, even with the teleconverter, especially if the bird's pretty far away. If they're like, you know, 30 meters away or less, I can, I can pretty much get it. If they're more than 30 meters away, no problem at all. But then what kind of shot is that going to be, right? It's not going to be great anyway. Okay, let me check the chat section, see if anyone had any questions about what I talked about. Oh, Robin. Hey, Robin, how are you? Good to see you, buddy. Um, always good to see Robin Wong. Um, let's see. It says here, Interesting, when shooting video full HD 240ps on the G9 Mark II, the 4150-2.8 lens has AF, but the 150-400 Pro does not. The camera should not have AF. Interesting. I don't think I'll get the G9 Mark II unless I can get it for like $1,000. Then I might replace my OM1 for my photo jobs because of the video. It has better video, and because a lot of my jobs are mixed photo video, I could, but as it is, the OM1 is more than enough for what I need now. But I could up my game a little bit with the G9 Mark II on the video side. And David says, I rarely take the teleconverter off unless I do not have much light. Yeah, I honestly, Dave, I would pocket that teleconverter with that lens. I mean, you're just killing the light. It's better to get lower ISO and faster shutter speeds, because you're losing a full stop. I mean, he was shooting at like f9, okay? He was shooting those hummingbirds at f9 in the shade. I mean, come on, man. Anyway, just my thoughts. I shoot with the 200-400 VR Nikon 1.4 TC in bright sun only with okay results, but I agree, avoid teleconverters. Yes, because you'll be at like f8, f9 with that lens too, right? And System Matures, agree with all you say about the excellent 300 f4 plus TC's best option for birds. Thank you, Dave. Now our System Matura has the big white, the 150-400. He also has the 300 f4. And when I was talking about this lens in the forums, and then maybe it was in the streams, everyone told me that the 300 f4 with the teleconverter is every bit as good as the 150-400. And you'd have to pixel peep to see the difference. There will be a difference, clearly, right? There's a reason that lens is $7,000 plus. But for the most part, if you don't want to spend $7,500, you can get the 300 f4 with TC. It's pretty much the same thing for all intents and purposes. And then, oh yeah, I think this is David Eisel's video about, I still haven't watched that yet, but David's been telling me to watch this video from David Eisel about all the different videos, telephoto lenses for OM systems and Olympus. And David Eisel does a very, very thorough job and often points out things that a lot of other people miss, including myself. And I consider myself a fairly detail-oriented person, but he's a little bit more knowledgeable about all that stuff than I am. And so I would recommend David Eisel, or I'm sorry, what the heck, Thomas Eisel. My brain is I'm having a brain fart again. Thomas Eisel. Sorry for that. In general, for all things OM System Olympus, it's a good watch on all those videos. Thomas, thank you, Thomas Eisel. Huh. I don't know why I have a brain fart sometimes. I'm sinking down in my seat. So that's the gist of what I wanted to talk about today. Love the 150-600. And I think if I were buying today without knowing what the 300 f4 can do, I wouldn't be disappointed I got the 150-600 instead. But if my 300 millimeter got lost or stolen or something, I would replace it. I still wouldn't buy the 150-600. Again, that's because I don't need the zoom feature so much. I mean, when I'm doing birds, I would probably always be at 600 millimeters on that lens because I'm always at 420 on my 300 with the teleconverter on it. And I don't have any problems. And the birds are still too small in the frame a lot of times, right? Um, but yeah, it really is an amazing lens. Um, so this one shows interesting. The 150 to 600 Pro produces very sharp photos when used with the 1.4 TC and also with the 1.25 TC switched on. Amazing 700 millimeter reach. Yeah, so I guarantee that 700 millimeters is sharper than using the 300 millimeter with a 2x teleconverter, right? Because then that would make it a 600 millimeter lens. I guarantee that's going to be very soft compared to this 150 to 400 with the 700. So but we're talking about the extremes of telephoto photography, right? I mean, not many of us really can afford and or need that much reach. I mean, we could all use that kind of reach, but yeah, it's kind of a balance. Do we want to carry 700 millimeters? Do we want to pay for 700 millimeters, with a relatively fast aperture? That's another thing, which begs the question, and this comes up all the time, right? What about like a Canon R7 with the 800 millimeter f9 or whatever it is? I don't know, because you can get that set up for less than the cost of any of the OM system lenses. But I don't know what the sharpness is, the resolution. Certainly at f9, you're going to be at very high ISOs. And let's say the autofocus is the same. I don't think it would be better, but I don't know. I've never used it. But ultimately, I think OM system, they get everything right. Like Emily uh, from Micro Four Nerds did a great comparison between the G9 Mark II and the OM1 Mark II. And long story short, the OM1 Mark II is like probably the best wildlife camera ever, right? The best one she's ever used anyway. And I would argue it's probably one of the best cameras ever for wildlife shooting when you factor in the small size and weight. Size and weight and cost aside, a lot of people argue the A1 with not the Mark II or whatever's out, the high-end Sony, I think it's an A1, with a 600 millimeter f4 will produce amazing results, right? Have great autofocus and that. But you're talking about $20,000. It better be. It better be better. You're going to spend 20 grand. But if you can get 90, 95% there for less than 5K, because it's what, about 2,000 for an all-in-one and 3,000 for a lens. So 5,000 for an all-in-one setup, brand new, versus a brand new setup on a Sony uh, at 20,000, 4 times the cost. But I digress. There's a lot of great camera systems out there. I don't want to knock any of them. Everything has their strengths and weaknesses, caveats, and you have to find what works best for you and your photography, so to speak, right? Marsh said, for fun, I turned on the digital teleconverter on the 4150 with MC20, 1200 millimeters altogether. I'm astonished that it's functional and not bad in sharpness. That is true. So you're getting a 300F 5.6, and then you're doubling that to make it a 600. So it's a 1200 millimeter equivalent in a 5.6. And that, the 2X is interpolating from wherever it's interpolating from 10, from 20 down to 10 megapixels. And the Olympus digital teleconverter does a pretty decent job. You really wouldn't be able to tell the difference in camera versus just cropping a raw image yourself, because that's what it's doing basically, right? But I assume there's some additional processing uh, when it converts it, because I not only does it convert it down, it takes 20 megapixels down to 10, but it upscales it back to 20 megapixels and then interpolates whatever it needs to with the digital teleconverter. So it's a fun feature, and it's very practical. It helps you frame images that might be kind of far away that you know you're going to crop anyway. But always shoot RAW plus JPEG. Make sure you get the raw image and process that one to taste. But a lot of times you can just use the straight out of camera JPEG if you want, right? Um, and System Mature says, in my informal opinion, Allman is best for photos, but for me, the G9 Mark II is best for video. Yeah, clearly. I think that is the general consensus between Panasonic and OM Systems across the lineup, right? Um, and that still holds true today, even with all the improvements that Panasonic has made on the photo side, where they're probably 90% there. But OM Systems still has the edge in so many ways. I would encourage you to watch Micro Four Nerds comparison between the Geno Mark II and OM1 Mark II. She did a really good job explaining the differences. But clearly for video, G9 Mark II is way superior. It's not even close. And that's always been the case, really, since the beginning of time. Um, should be f2.8. Well, when you add the teleconverter, that doubles your aperture to f5.6 in this case. And then you can stay there with the digital teleconverter. The digital teleconverter does not multiply the aperture, only the physical teleconverter. Yeah, a lot of people use the 40 to 150 with the teleconverters and get great results. And I think you can get away with using a 2x teleconverter on the 40 to 150 because it doesn't have quite the reach in general, so you have to get closer to your subject. So you're reducing the distance to your subject, so you're able to feed it more pixels. Never mind the lens is tack sharp. I don't know how sharp it is compared to, say, the 300. I'm sure those comparisons have been done, but I can't imagine the 300 f4 not being sharper than a 40 to 150 with a teleconverter. But not everybody wants to buy 40 to 150 and a 300 when they can just get away with a teleconverter. You get pretty much the same thing, right? Like I said, if you can fill the sensor with enough pixels, you can extrapolate usually, with DxO anyway, you can extrapolate a lot of detail out of the image. And that's why I love DxO so much is I've never seen any other editor extract so much detail from a raw image than DxO. And I haven't compared all the latest software across the board, but let's just assume Lightroom is fairly competitive. DxO does a better job than Lightroom. Clearly, with just detail. For noise reduction, way better job. So when you combine slightly better detail and demosaicing of the raw images with the optical corrections on top of the way superior noise reduction, DxO just blows Lightroom out of the water. It's a little hyperbolic, right? It does a better job. Let's just say it does a better job than Lightroom. And System matures, is there any way I can increase the depth of field when shooting close subjects? Shooting close to subject. Other than the obvious, stopping your lens down to f11 I wouldn't go beyond that because then you start to get diffraction. Um, and I assume you mean you're shooting with the 150 to 400 or 300 f4, and you're trying to get very, very close. With a telephoto lens, the Olympus telephoto lens, you get pretty close. Minimum focusing distance, like 1.4 meters on the 300 f4. Uh, you you would have to stop down. That's really the only way. Um, the only other thing I can think of is if you're using use a wider angle lens, and that inherently gives you a deeper depth of field. Those are really the only two variables when it comes to depth of field is distance, aperture, and field of view for composition purposes. Field of view does not affect depth of field, but when you're trying to compose an image using two different fields of view, you have to be at a different distance, right? You have to get closer with a 30 millimeter, say, than a 60. But if you get closer, it's 30 millimeters. Your depth of field is going to be the same. So, yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer beyond the obvious distance and aperture. Yeah, there's this focus stacking. I mean, focus stacking is great if the subject's not moving. And it takes about, I forget, I timed it once. The fastest I was able to get the focus stacking, like 15 frames, I think was 1.5 seconds. Don't quote me on that. If you have let's say 2 seconds, it'll focus stack in 2 seconds, 15 images. That subject cannot move for 2 seconds. Think about it. That's basically a long exposure shot, right? It's a 2 second long exposure if you do focus stacking. Even though each individual frame might be 1/1000th of a second, whatever that might be, or 1/250th of a second, the time it takes for the camera to move the lens and take the image, it takes almost 2 seconds for it to do 15 shots, uh, which ultimately becomes a long exposure. And your subject cannot move in those 2 seconds. Software can correct for that a little bit, right, by realigning things. But yeah. So I've been shooting video with my 40-150 plus 1.4 TC at f16 to try and keep the butterfly in focus. Wow. Yeah, butterflies, if you're filling the frame with a butterfly, um, yeah, f16 is it. And that's a little rough because you're in heavy diffraction territory at that point. So the image is not going to be as sharp as say f8 or less. Okay, don't see any other questions here. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, let me show you what I did this morning. Uh, Going back to my Hummingbird technique. I have to close a couple of things. Let me see if I can get this to show. So I was practicing with flash this morning. I think I have some shots here that I can show you comparison. Let me find it. This one might be one. This one and yeah, this is a good example here. So if you look at this shot here, this is without flash. Yeah. So you can see the bird is basically it's too dark here, but this is typical morning light. And then if we go to this shot here, is it this one? Yeah, I think it's either one of these. This is with flash. You can see the shadows are filled in quite a bit more. And this would be very, very easy to correct in post versus say this one here that's kind of silhouetted, right? It's very, very dark. So if I try to bring up the shadows on this, I'm going to bring up a lot of noise and lose detail versus, a shot like this, the flash is filling in, and then I get a little bit of catch light in the eye too, right? Um, okay, and then I have some other examples here. Look. These I took this morning just before the stream. That's why I was a few minutes late. This is a good example too, I think. Let me look at the EXIF data. Yeah, that's with flash. Okay, this was without flash, I believe. And then, oops. Dang it, that's not a great example. Pretty sure that was with flash. The exit data is not showing me if it was flash or not. And some of these I know was definitely flash. Like this was definitely I was using flash. But the exit data is telling me I did not use flash. I'm not sure why that is. Let me see. This one was with flash. That was without flash. This was with flash. So I was able to fill in a little bit. This is a black bird, so I would probably have back focused a little bit here, didn't it? There's something else I wanted to talk about. A lot of these shots, right? Like this is the bird behind some other sticks and stuff. And I was using bird detect, and if I recall, the box was on this bird and it missed focus. But that said, the next shot was in focus, like this one. That's without flash. This is with flash. So you can see the difference here. Without flash and with flash, I'm getting a lot more light on the subject. And then it missed here and missed here. This is another shot. That's with flash, I believe. This is without flash. This is just ambient light. With ambient light only, my ISO was on this shot, my ISO was at 2500. I know that's hard to see, but I'm at 1/1000th of a second ISO 2500. But with the flash, like on this shot, why am I at ISO 2000? Let me find another shot. Here's why. Okay, so this same shot, this one's out of focus, but this same shot was at ISO 400. 1/500th of a second. So, sorry, I'm rambling a bit here. I'm trying to find. I just took these this morning, like 15 minutes before the stream started. Let me go up to. Wait, it must be way up here. Let me see. I think it's these. Now look at this shot here. This blue jay is behind all of these sticks and leaves. If I zoom out, the bird detect saw the bird and focused on it. Let's look at the next one. Again, I was using continuous autofocus with bird detect. It went right through all the sticks and branches and got the bird. Same thing here. And let's look at the next one. This is just a sequence I did here, here, looking good. And this is with flash, of course. Here. This one's a little bit off, but not bad. Looks like it focused on the stick, maybe? No. Even in here, we did good. This one is on. This one is spot on. But what I'm trying to say is, my camera, I had to send my camera in to get repaired. They replaced the shutter, but they also updated the firmware before I had a chance to fix it or test it and compare 1.5 to 1.6. My gut feeling is I really didn't see any difference in the autofocus performance, except maybe in this particular circumstance where the bird is behind a stick or a leaf or a branch. There's no way for me to quantify this and verify this, unfortunately, because I just can't go back to firmware 1.5 anymore. But it feels like it's doing a better job in this kind of situation where I can get behind the stick and behind the leaves and focus on the bird when it sees the bird. It was still missing a lot, right, in these situations. But it went from being almost impossible to get a shot like this with autofocus versus being a little bit surprised, like, wow, it's getting these now. So I feel like, because a lot of people they're saying they see no difference. OM system is not claiming any improvement in autofocus with firmware 1.6. I don't think they're denying it, but they're certainly not taking credit for it. And others, on a more limited basis, are saying, I see an improvement. So put me in the camp that I think I see an improvement in this particular scenario. I think. Because I don't recall having any luck with these kind of shots where the bird is behind a stick or a branch and getting it in focus like this. And this shot will clean up really nice with DxO. Like if I just apply a basic preset, and crop in, etc. Anyways, I have a photo editing stream you guys can watch where I do this kind of stuff. But I never had luck with these kind of shots. Here's another one. Clearly, this bird is behind the stick, and it's really close. You might have focused on the stick here, and the bird slightly out. And then did the bird fly off? Yeah, the bird was flying off, I think, here. You can see him taking off. And then the next shot, he's completely out of the frame. But you get my point. Is I feel like there was a little improvement. Let me know in the chat section or in the comments if you're watching this later if you noticed any improvement for this kind of shot. but I feel like there is a slight improvement. But there's no, like I said, no way for me to quantify it. Okay, let me catch up on the chat again. Sydney says, check out my slow-mo video clip of Cinnabar month. Those settings on my Facebook and Instagram. Okay, I'll see if I can find that. I don't know what your face. I don't use Facebook that much. I think I am. I might be following you on Instagram. I am following you. So the slow motion video of the Cinnabar Mall. It must be this one. So I think it's this. This is Brian's. Oops, Nature with Music. I guess it's this one, right? Or is it this? I can't tell. Yeah, this is the Cinnabar Moth. Oh, cool. Quick like. So the comments say, still trying to get my head around shooting video at 240 FPS handheld with Panasonic G9 Mark II and subsequent slow motion editing with Cinemoth. Footage shot handheld at wonderful warm UK. It's a little bit out of, I can't read it. It's the print's too small. Oh, that is cool. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Um, let's see. We have. Can you do a live show in the wild or point of view vid of you doing wildlife? Your images I've seen are really good. I can try. I'd have to find. I'd have to find a place that has Wi-Fi because I have limited data on my phone. I got like 5 gig, but if I did like a 1 hour show, that would eat up 5 gig like that, right? Um, so I'd have to find a place that has Wi-Fi, and that's tough to do in the wild. Um, I can often find signal, but even that can be a problem sometimes. But Wi-Fi is the biggest issue. I'd have to do Wi-Fi to stream in the wild, and that's very hard to do. But I'll keep an eye out. I mean, I did a stream in my backyard one time of the birds, like some of the images I showed today. That wasn't very exciting. I do have a stream I did that um, with flash and everything. It was a couple hour stream. It was a little hard to watch, but you can try. I don't. It was very early on. If I can find that episode, let me just do a quick search. Live backyard. Let me see. Yeah. It's episode 218 and 219. So they are. So this is one I did in my backyard, and then so like this is one I did in my backyard. Episodes episodes 218 and 219. Let's go out. But I don't know if this is what you were looking for. This is the one I was using flash. But it's different because the flash, what I did here, let me go back. You can see I set the flashes up right near the bird feeder. And then I set up so that you could see what I was seeing in my camera. So this might not be a bad way to start, Darko. I put a link to this. It's either, as you can see, this is episode 218, as you can see down here. I did get some really good shots on this particular stream. You know, and of course this is straight out of camera, so you're seeing it uh, without any editing at all. So a lot of these will need a little bit of post-processing. Yeah, I had the camera hooked up to the stream. So that's something I can do that again if you guys want. Just let me know in the chat section if you want me to do that again. I can try. Okay. Let's see. It says I often do OM workspace first, and if necessary, run through an old Topaz sharpening denoise software. I probably do the opposite. I probably do old Topaz sharpening or denoise, and then we should be able to edit the TIFF in workspace. I think we can. Because I feel like workspace, I guess either way works. I'm sure you've tried both ways and you found this to be better. Says, I'm amazed at the bird shots you've taken. Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me because I know you take a lot of amazing bird photography, um, as people have just seen on your Instagram. Okay, so what was the other thing I wanted to talk about? So I talked about this morning. I really didn't prep this morning to show you the shots with and without flash. Uh, so that was a little painful to watch. I'm sorry about that, but you get the idea that, and that's what I wanted to do with the hummingbirds. Like you saw in that video that I did in my backyard, where I could set the flashes up right near the feeders, because the birds get used to it. They don't mind the flashes being right there. It takes a while, like 15, 20 minutes sometimes. Um, but once they get a feel for it, they don't care. And the flashes don't bother them or hurt them at all, as far as I know. If people know otherwise, I know some animals you don't want to do that. I forget which ones. The ones that I've never taken pictures of anyway. But so David, the only caveat to using flash with birds is you're not going to use pro capture or any silent shutter. You're going to be limited to mechanical shutter. And I don't think I'll be able to get more than 5 to 10 frames per second with flash. And, I don't know how many shots I can get. I only may be able to get 1 or 2 seconds at that speed, right? Well, 2 or 3 seconds at that speed before the flashes are going to start to recycle. So LED lighting might be a better option, but that's a little bit more, because if you use LED lighting, you can use Pro Capture, Silent Shutter. But I'm going to have less runtime because to get an LED light bright enough to illuminate that area for the hummingbirds or birds in general, battery power, I might get a half hour of enough light. Now I could bring a whole elaborate setup with a power bank, 300-watt power bank, and I don't know if the park would appreciate that. What if I just have one light, small light on a light stand that I can collapse down and put in my pocket? That might be okay, right? Setup, I think at today's prices, you can get done for about $1,000 to $1,200, and you have an amazing wildlife super telephoto setup for very little money. I see Eric comment. Someone's mentioned your name here. Curious, when you send your OM1 for repairs with OM Systems, did they ship it overseas or was it in the States? It was here in the States. Pennsylvania specifically. It went to Pennsylvania. So door to door, I sent it out on Thursday. It was available to me again Thursday, the following Thursday. So 7 days, 5 business days, but 7 days, it was back to my door. I picked it up on Friday, but door to door was 7 days. And very, very fast. They replaced the shutter, updated the firmware, cleaned the camera like spotless. It was so clean, bang. And all under warranty because I got the 4 or 5 year, I don't know what it is. I think I got the 4 year extended warranty, so 5 years total. Whatever it is, I got, so I got it done under warranty. No cost to myself. Now I did spend like $40 shipping it because I sent it insured. Things are so freaking expensive these days. It's just driving me nuts. Uh, Good to see you. And then Bob says, I find the O1 Mark II gives me better success rate with this. Absolutely. I mean, everyone is saying that the O1 Mark II autofocus definitely improved. How much improved is, depends who you talk to, right? Uh, but it's definitely improved over the Mark One. And I want to make sure I didn't miss any other comments. How does the home workspace compare? Oh, I don't know, John. I don't know if you were here a little bit earlier. I did show an image. I'll show it again real quick. Uh, Let me give you the link and you can look at it directly. So it was this image here. I compared them side by side. So I will give you the link. So there's the link directly to the photo, and it's pretty much full res, and you compare directly. And this is I was using D Prime XD, which is the older version of the noise reduction. PureRAW 4, which is not really a photo editor, it's just a processing software for noise and sharpness, optical corrections, and a lot cheaper. I don't think you can get 20% off anymore. I think that deal is done. So you're going to pay $110 or something for it now instead of like 89. But anyway, PureRAW 4 has the latest denoising algorithms, and it is better than what you're going to see in this particular image I provided a link to. It will do a better job, uh, just slightly, better. But every pixel counts, right? When we're denoising. So the way I like to think of it. Hello, Wayne. How are you? Good to see you. And I think I was going to elaborate on something that another viewer asked me, and I'll wrap it up with that. Uh, what I need to do is open up the window. This was one someone emailed in to me. Oh, there's a bunch of other pictures that I haven't shown you guys. I wanted to show you. Uh, no, dang it, where is it? People email me to different address. Let me check my other box. Maybe it's in this one. Oh yeah, it's here. Okay. So this question was about, can you make a note about covering on Sunday if we need to always shoot at the highest resolution like LSF, which is large superfine? Are there advantages to shooting lower megapixels regarding dynamic range, color, or any other quality? Nick collection, is there any other software DxO that I need? Okay. So let me answer these questions best I can. I did answer them. I did respond already in email, and they have seen that. But let me get back to the live. Okay, now I'm back here. um, okay, so quickly with DxO, they have PhotoLab 7, which is a full-on photo editor software. It's my preferred editor. If you don't want to continue with the subscription model from Adobe, you can just buy 7 with optics modules, so that even if you buy a new camera a few years from now, it should support it, at least at this point in time. However, if PhotoLab 8 comes out, you have to pay an upgrade price, which is usually $100, give or take, depending on sales and coupons. But you would have to upgrade. You'd have to pay for an upgrade. So ultimately, it becomes like a subscription model if you're buying the upgrades every year, or every other year. But in practice, if you have PhotoLab 7, you can stay with that forever. I think Marcia, you're still on PhotoLab 4. Let me ask you, Marcia, if you're still here, are they still updating the optics modules for PhotoLab 4? Because that's like a 4-year-old piece of software. If they're still, because can you use your own one and your 150 to or whatever lens you have? I think you have the 150 to 600. But let me know in the chat section if that's the case. They also have a few other things, but I'm just going to touch on Nick Collection and Film Pack. So Film Pack is basically very Marcia says, I haven't tried it yet. Okay. Sorry, I thought you would know. I don't know because I upgrade, at this point I'm getting upgrades from DxO directly, so I don't have to get the latest version. But when I open up PhotoLab 5, I opened it up last year. I opened up PhotoLab 5 on my other laptop, and that's the version I paid for with my own money. It updated the optics module to whatever was current last year. But I don't recall if that included the OM one or not. Unfortunately, I just don't remember. But it was updating at least the lenses. So I assume I have to get back to you on that. But let's talk about Nick Collection and Film Pack. Film Pack is just, film simulations, but they also add luminosity masking at a very high level with a lot more precision than you can do with the luminosity masking that's already in PhotoLab 7. And a lot of people like that feature. A lot of people like the color sliders that you get in addition with Film Pack 7. They also like the fine contrast slider. So you get a few extra tools with Film Pack 7 that a lot of people really like. In addition to the film simulations, which to me is kind of a crapshoot. I don't think you can ever emulate film, but if anybody's going to do it well, DxO is going to do the best job. We're, as good as anyone else, in my opinion. But I can't speak to how accurate those are. But I don't care what anybody tells you. You may be able to duplicate film for a single image almost exactly, right? Because we're talking about digital, and you can adjust colors all day long and get the exact look of a film image for a single image, assuming it's the same scene, same shot. etc. However, shot to shot, there's no way a single film simulation is going to be reproducible across hundreds, if not thousands, of images in your digital catalog. There's just no way, because film responds differently in different lighting conditions, with different colors, different color casts. I mean, it's just not possible. So I wouldn't buy the film pack to get film simulations, specifically if you're looking for that specific film simulation. I don't care who makes a film simulation. It's not going to work. Okay. You will get some very interesting presets that they named, like Portra 400, HP5. These presets are relatively close, especially the black and whites are actually very close to film stock. But I've compared my film with the film simulations in Film Pack 5. The black and white film is closer to actual film that I've used in camera. But the color, it's close, but it's close on some images, very close. On other images, it's off. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just not possible because, like I said, film responds very differently to light than a digital camera. But if you want those other tools, particularly the luminosity masking, Compact 7 is the only thing that has, and it integrates very smoothly with DxO Photolab 7. Let me get my shameless plug-in. This is my affiliate link, okay, for DxO. Please use that if you're going to buy it. If you're on trial now, use that link again because it's all cookie based, etc. So I'd love to get credit. The film simulations in Nik Collection are not the same ones that you get in Film Pack. And for example, Portra 400 in Nik Collection does not give the same look as Portra 400 in Film Pack 7. At least the last time I checked, I was using Film Pack 6 and Nik Collection 5. I've only recently upgraded to Nik Collection 7, but you could apply Portra 400 from Nik Collection and from Film Pack. They're not going to be the same for whatever reason. But Nik Collection gives you HDR capability, pretty amazing stuff there. And it does a better job than Lightroom, in my opinion. The also gives you double exposure capability. So if you like doing double exposures, there's a lot of tools there for doing double exposures. We'll stack two images on top of each other. And of course you can put that process in a loop and you do as many multiple exposures as you want. There's a certain workflow for that, which I don't see. But if you're a very creative person, Nik Collection has a bunch of tools that will really take your creativity to another level, beyond what Photolab 7 can do, right? So I'm talking in terms of tools. Nik Collection has a lot of tools. It has a lot of presets, but those are the two, HDR and double exposure. Those are the two tools that I use quite a bit. It also has silver effects, which many professional photographers, enthusiasts love to death. It's okay. I like processing the images myself from scratch using Photolab, but a lot of professionals, they love that silver effects, which includes black and white film simulations, if I recall correctly. I don't use that much. And then there's Viveza and a bunch of other stuff in there. Sharpening tools that are very good in there. So if you want to do sharpening above and beyond what Photolab 7 does, I'm not saying it does a better job, it just does a different, it applies sharpening very differently. It applies noise reduction, but it has a noise reduction thing. It's not anywhere near close to what Photolab 7 can do, but it's just more tools. Okay. So for my money, Photolab 7, if you really want a second tool, Nik Collection. But some people like the Film Pack and Photolab 7. So look at those three. They also have some other stuff, but like Viewpoint for doing perspective corrections. You can get 99% done in Photolab 7, but Viewpoint does have some additional tools. And it's not that expensive. So if you're really hardcore into perspective corrections and geometry, Viewpoint might make sense to you. And I forget what the other one is. That's my opinion. Okay. Yeah, come on over. I don't really have an extra room here, but yeah, it'd be great to see you. And Roderick, absolutely agree with all you said with the focus range. Unfortunately, not always easy to do. Setting up focus limit range is a good option at the end of the day. Get in frame. Yeah, just get it in the frame. It's hard enough, right? Never mind how far away they are, how close they are, or how much they fill the frame. Okay, the other question had to do with settings, like RAW plus or large superfine JPEGs. There's superfine JPEG, there's large normal, and then there's lower resolution options like medium fine, medium normal, etc. There's all kinds of options for JPEG settings in our Olympus OM system cameras. And really any camera for that matter that has options for resolution and compression for JPEGs, always use the maximum. In Olympus, it would be large superfine. I think in Sony, it's just called fine. But in Olympus, it's LSF, large superfine. There is no downside to using the very best quality possible. I just cannot, in this day and age, I can't think of any reason to use a smaller file that has higher compression on top of lower resolution. I can't think of any scenario. With our 20 megapixel or 25 megapixel sensors, if you have a 60 megapixel sensor like my Sony over here, or a 45 megapixel sensor like the Nikons, and Canons, then it makes sense to reduce the resolution so that you can share those images directly, assuming the intent is to share the JPEG straight out of camera. Then it makes sense because a lot of online photo site sharing sites cannot handle a 45 or 60 megapixel JPEG. So you have to downsize it. You can downsize it in camera, but with our Olympus and other cameras, if you're at 25 megapixels or less, there's no reason not to use the highest resolution, lowest compression, best setting possible. Ideally, you're going to shoot in RAW, process in RAW, and convert to JPEG. And there, in JPEG, you can downsize or resize to whatever you think is appropriate. There may have been some reference to printing, or maybe I brought it up. But let's say your final destination is not online photo sharing sites, but you want to print your images. Again, use the highest resolution possible, even if you have a 60 megapixel JPEG sensor that creates 60 megapixel JPEGs. Because for printing, I can't think of any printer that does not extrapolate or interpolate whatever you send it into what is best for that printer. Assuming you're using the standard printer drivers with the paper profiles and all of that. If you're into high-end printing, you know what I'm talking about, right? You're going to use the right color profiles and the right paper profile. So you're going to have an ICC profile basically for your printer for specific papers and sometimes different inks, depending on your printer. But generally speaking, I just use the standard ICC profiles that the printer has built in, and I send it from my photo lab or whatever software I might be using to the printer, and the printer driver will extrapolate from whatever you send it, basically speaking, and produce the best print it can. You can, for processing reasons, reduce the size based on how large your print is going to be. If you're printing 8x10s, just send it to full res if you want, or you can downsize it, but I wouldn't downsize it too much for printing. Your printer and the software will handle all that for you. So I hope that makes sense. Just always use the highest resolution, lowest compression setting you can in camera, whether you're going to share online or print. The exception being if you have like 45 to 60 megapixel limits too. On Instagram, I don't think I can send more than a 25 megapixel image. You can send much smaller images to Instagram and it won't make any difference. A lot of people optimize Instagram images to like, 1 megapixel. Same thing for Facebook. But you can send up to, I think, 20 or 25 megapixels. Just try it. If it gets rejected, reduce it and try it again. I always send the highest resolution possible that the site will accept, because you don't know down the line if they're going to change their processing algorithms to take advantage of the original image that you sent them. In which case, it only benefits you or its images. David says all you need is 1920 for social, and that's true for now. I'm not going to get seeing it benefit for now. But my thinking is, why not send the highest you can, and then down. That's what I need, a fantastic photo printer. Like, yeah, I have an old Pro 100 that I got a good deal on. New in box for like, I paid $150 or something. So basically it was a steal. And that's why I pay for Flickr. Yeah, I have a Pro account there too. I don't think you have to pay if you have less than 1,000 images, but ultimately you're going to have to pay. I don't know what their criteria is anymore for paying and non-paying, for free versus paid. I don't know what's changed, if anything, but it used to be like 1,000 images and then you'd have to start paying. But Flickr is really good. I have pushed the limits of Flickr because it would not let me upload some large panels, high-res panels that I've done. So I've had to compress those down a bit. And people are saying they're getting intermittent buffering. So I apologize for that. Hopefully the replay will not have it buffering. Oh, okay. So they've started putting ads. Okay, because there used to be no ads on Flickr, even for the free accounts, if I recall. But I ended up paying for Flickr because I have so many images on there, and it's a great place for my where I put my favorite images, pretty much, both family, personal family stuff too. So that if anything happens, like my house burns down, that's really my only repository or backup, which is fine. I'm fine with just JPEGs for backups. Okay, I'm going to call it here. So you guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to have my live photo editing stream on Tuesday morning, same time. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you like these streams, any coffees or donations and links below are greatly appreciated. But thanks for being here today. I will see you again next week.